everyone. I'm Anita Sharma. You're watching A News. Here's what's making news right now. French President Emmanuel Macron says he will stay in office until the end of his term and appoint a new prime minister in the coming days. The UN's World Food Program warns fighting in Syria could displace 1.5 million people. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel testifies before a parliamentary committee investigating Germany's role in that chaotic 2021 Afghanistan withdrawal. We begin with the French president. He says he will remain in office until the end of his mandate. This comes amid calls for Emmanuel Macron to step down following a no-confidence vote that led to Prime Minister Michel Barnier's resignation Thursday.
French President Emmanuel Macron reaffirms he will not be stepping down before the end of his term in 2027. These remarks come following a no-confidence vote by the National Assembly that brought down the French government. Macron says the opposition is to blame for the current political situation and calls for the far right and far left that supported the no-confidence vote anti-Republican.
The mandate you democratically gave me is a 5-year mandate, and I will carry it out fully until the end. We cannot allow ourselves to be divided or do nothing. That's why I'll name a prime minister in the coming days. I will ask them to form a government in the general interest, representing all the political parties who can participate in it, or at least who agree not to bring it down.
Prime Minister Michel Barnier handed in his resignation on Thursday at the Élysée Presidential Palace. The no-confidence vote comes after Barnier bypassed Parliament to pass the Social Security budget. Barnier's actions were met with opposition from both the far right and far left, who collectively voted to topple his government.
If the next Prime Minister implements the measures for which we were prepared, such as overturn of retirement at the age of 64, increase in minimum wages and salaries, then we will support them. Otherwise, we will fight them.
Meanwhile, thousands of people protested in Paris over tough working conditions and budget cuts to public service on Thursday. The protests followed the proposition by the Prime Minister to cut billions of euros, including measures such as increasing unpaid sick leave for civil servants from 1 to 3 days.
Even if what happened with the government yesterday happened, we cannot think the fight is won. Quite the opposite. The fight is in the street and we need to mobilize all together, otherwise we will never win anything. The working conditions of people in hospitals are catastrophic, so we really need to mobilize today and tomorrow.
Many hope that the new Prime Minister will bring desired changes.
Rebels take control of Hama following their recent victory in Aleppo, Syria. Opposition forces claim they successfully drove the Syrian military out of Hama, marking another milestone in their rapid advance across the north.
The capture of Hama happens just days after rebels seized the northern city of Aleppo and pushed south from their stronghold in northwest Syria. Opposition forces claim they ousted the Syrian military from Hama in their latest victory during a rapid advance across the country's north. The Syrian army, however, states that it redeploys outside the city to preserve civilian lives and prevent urban combat. This marks a significant blow to President Bashar Assad and his allies. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres calls on all those with influence to help the long-suffering people of Syria and reminds all parties of their obligation under international law to protect civilians.
Now, this latest offensive was launched into government-controlled areas by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a group sanctioned by the Security Council, along with a broad range of other armed opposition groups. It has led to significant shifts in the front lines, and tens of thousands of civilians are at risk in a region already on fire. We are seeing the bitter fruits of a chronic collective failure of previous de-escalation arrangements to produce a genuine nationwide ceasefire, or a serious political process to implement Security Council resolutions.
Turkey's National Security Council, led by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, expresses strong support for Syria's unity and stability. The Council pledges to fight terror groups threatening both Syria and Turkey, calls for peace through reconciliation between the Syrian government and opposition forces.
كونوا كحزب الله إلى جانب سوريا.
Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem also states that his group will stand alongside Syria to thwart the goals of this aggression.
Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's grip on power continues to weaken as armed groups continue to capture more territory from government forces. Following last week's surprise capture of Aleppo, the rebels led by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, continue to move south towards Damascus as the Syrian army falls back after retreating from the strategic city of Hama. Governments across the Middle East are monitoring the situation very closely amid concerns over further destabilization in the region. From Tel Aviv, let's get more now from our correspondent Trent Murray.
Well, the sheer speed of this HTS-led lightning offensive in Syria has really caught many people in this region by surprise, including here in Israel. We are being told that the top brass from the Israeli Defence Force has been holding situation assessments here at the IDF HQ in Tel Aviv, keeping a very close eye on what is going on and also briefing senior members of the government, including the Defence Minister. Of course, what happens in Syria is of real consequence for Israel, given that they do share a fairly lengthy border. We are being told that the IDF has called up some additional troops to be placed on that border, given the situation, just to be placed on standby for any sort of instability. But I think of real consequence for the Israelis is what Iran does in all of this. They don't want to see Iranian forces up near their border in Syria. We are being told that through back channels they have sent a warning to Tehran not to send forces into Syria and, crucially, not to send weapons in that could be smuggled over to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, speaking of Hezbollah, we are tracking earlier today several airstrikes on land border crossings between Lebanon and Syria. The IDF says they were behind that. They hit those crossings, in their view, in order to try and prevent weapons being sent again into Lebanon from Syria. But really, I think for the Israelis, just like many in this region, they are just waiting and watching to see what happens next. Israeli officials have told the Axios news outlet in the US that the sheer speed has really caught them by surprise and that they expected the government forces of Bashar al-Assad to put up a stiffer defence. But according to Israeli intelligence, those forces and those defence lines of Bashar al-Assad's forces are crumbling much faster than they thought. Trent Murray for A News, Tel Aviv.
Russian President Vladimir Putin signs a decree allowing new payment methods for Russian gas, bypassing sanctioned Gazprom Bank. The 5th of December decree permits payments through mutual debt cancellation and no longer requires transactions via Gazprom Bank, which was sanctioned by the United States last month. This move aims to ease payment processes amid restrictions on the dollar and euro transactions. Hungary, Slovakia, and Serbia remain among the few European buyers of Russian pipeline gas. Austria recently ceased imports. Concerns persist that sanctions may expand to other banks handling Russian gas payments. Meantime, Abkhazia, Georgia's breakaway region, warns about severe economic issues after Russia stopped providing financial aid. Local authorities say remaining funds are being redirected to purchase electricity from Russia. Financial officials warn that salary payments will soon be unfeasible. Abkhazia's economic trouble started in September when Russia halted financial support, citing Abkhazia's failure to align its local laws for deeper integration with Moscow. Abkhazia, a region with a history of geopolitical complexities, is now facing new challenges. Shifting demographics, regional tensions, and external influences are reshaping its dynamics. To explore these developments and their broader impact, we are very pleased to be joined by political analyst Levan Mamaladze. Let's take a closer look.
In Abkhazia, the current situation is comprised of several components. Everyone must understand that Abkhazia is governed by clans and clan-based groups. These include the Gudauta clan, the Ochamchira clan, and others. Abkhazia is now entering a very complex period. If a census were conducted, which hasn't been done, it might reveal that a majority of the population is now Armenian. This is yet another distinct group. The Armenian population in Abkhazia has grown significantly since the end of the Karabakh War and Azerbaijan's restoration of its territorial integrity. Many Armenians emigrated to Abkhazia after that. This creates a complicated situation in Abkhazia. The Abkhaz people are reluctant to cede their authority over the use of land to so-called Russian investors. Russia has also realized that this is not an easily governed territory. Historically, we lived together, and we know the Abkhaz people well. Georgia has always taken these nuances into account. I don't want to directly say that what is happening in Georgia is connected to Abkhazia. However, it is related to the fact that Georgia has decided not to play the game the West is proposing to us. All the Maidan-style unrest in Tbilisi, the vandalism and the violence by demonstrators were part of a single plan, a scenario of so-called revolutions. But this will not succeed. The authorities are taking measures. It is deceptive to claim that firing fireworks and pyrotechnics at police is democracy, while police arresting instigators is violence. This is completely wrong and represents the narrative the West is promoting. Therefore, Georgia has decided not to participate in these games. Georgia has chosen not to be exploited. We have seen what happened in Ukraine with Ukrainization. We want peace. The majority of Georgians have chosen to support the strengthening of our sovereignty. That is the process we are currently undergoing. This is interconnected with regional issues, including Abkhazia and South Ossetia. One could say that Georgia has not taken steps against Russia and has not entered into direct confrontation with it, despite Russia's efforts to create tensions with the West. We have not imposed direct sanctions on Russia because they are our neighbors. Although some territories are occupied, we understand the importance of accounting for these nuances. Georgia wants peace and good neighborly relations. In light of these trends, Russia is also considering measures and steps toward reconciliation, resolving conflicts and fostering peace. This would allow Georgia to engage in direct contact with the Abkhaz and Ossetians to address these problems. The focus is not on political solutions yet. That stage must be reached in time. We do not want anyone to use this as an opportunity to provoke new confrontations in Skin Valley or Sukhumi. Thus, the resolution of Abkhazian and other territorial conflicts on our land will proceed within this context. We will see what steps Russia takes. We hope they will not obstruct progress, but instead facilitate it. We have initiated dialogue with the Abkhaz and the Ossetians and hope to finally close these conflicts. Political solutions will mature and come later.
Taiwan's leader Lai Ching-te wants China to refrain from, quote, provocative actions as tensions escalate in the region. His remarks come ahead of expected Chinese military drills in response to his recent visits to the Pacific and the United States.
As military tensions continue to rise, Taiwan's leader, Lai Ching-te, has called for China to unclench its fists. His comments follow China's sanctioning U.S. companies involved in arms sales to Taiwan, as Beijing views any foreign interaction with Taiwan as a challenge to its sovereignty. Lai's recent visits to U.S. territories, including Hawaii and Guam, have particularly angered Beijing. Security sources indicate that China is expected to launch another round of military exercises in response to Lai's trip to the Pacific. Despite China's objections, Lai emphasized that Taiwan would not be deterred in its pursuit of international engagement. In response, China has ramped up the number of military exercises near Taiwan, including war games in May and October, further inflaming tensions. Chinese officials continue to assert Taiwan as part of China and warn the U.S. not to interfere in what they consider internal matters.
The political situation in South Korea remains tense after President Yoon Suk-yeol failed to impose martial law. Ongoing protests demand his impeachment, escalating the crisis.
Protests in South Korea persist, calling for President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment after his failed attempt to impose martial law. The crisis deepens with military involvement and accusations against lawmakers, intensifying pressure on Yoon's leadership. Protesters, led by labor unions like the Korean Federation of Trade Unions, continue to demand president's impeachment, carrying slogans condemning his martial law as a betrayal of democracy. Ruling party leader Han Dong-hoon revealed Yoon had ordered the arrest of politicians deemed anti-state forces during the martial law period, further complicating the crisis. South Korea's Special Warfare Commander Kwak Jung-kyun stated he would refuse any future martial law orders. He also revealed that the former defense minister had ordered the military to forcibly remove lawmakers voting against the martial law declaration. The president's decree temporarily granted military control, banning protesters and political actions. He accused the opposition Democratic Party of acting against the state and supporting North Korea. The decree was reversed within hours after public outcry.
In Brazil, hundreds of people took to the streets of Sao Paulo to protest police brutality. This after videos surfaced of alleged misconduct and violence.
A demand for justice. Hundreds of demonstrators filled the streets of Sao Paulo in Brazil to voice their concerns over the recent cases of police brutality. This comes after questionable footage of the military police surfaced, giving rise to allegations of misconduct and violence. Protesters expressed frustration over the common occurrence of such cases.
Even if what happened was the government yesterday happened, we cannot think the fight is won. Quite the opposite. The fight is in the street and we need to mobilize all together, otherwise we will never win anything. The working conditions of people in hospitals are catastrophic, so we really need to mobilize today and tomorrow.
Recent incidents of police brutality in Brazil include one in which a policeman pushed a young black man off a bridge. Another involved an off-duty policeman who shot a man dead for allegedly stealing soap from a market. The protesters demand punishment for the officers involved and call for the military police to be demilitarized.
We really need our voices to be heard. We need to fight more and more. We need to take to the streets to expose the police, which are so violent in the states of Sao Paulo and in Brazil.
The demonstrators are calling for the resignation of the commander of the Public Security Secretariat of Sao Paulo. Brazilian police authorities are yet to respond.
Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel testifies before a parliamentary committee investigating Germany's role in the chaotic 2021 Afghanistan withdrawal.
Germany's involvement in Afghanistan ended abruptly on August 15, 2021, when the Taliban seized Kabul. The German government, including then-Chancellor Angela Merkel, did not anticipate the rapid Taliban takeover, leading to a chaotic evacuation of German citizens and Afghan allies. Since 2022, a Bundestag inquiry has been investigating the mistakes behind the withdrawal, with Merkel as the final witness. The ex-chancellor reiterated that the mission was meant to prevent terrorist attacks from Afghanistan. Angela Merkel acknowledged that foreign governments failed to meet key objectives, such as promoting the rule of law and women's rights. She also pointed to cultural misunderstandings, nepotism, and drug trafficking as reasons for the failure. She admitted being initially reluctant to evacuate Afghan development workers, fearing it would signal that Germany was abandoning Afghanistan. Merkel's testimony aligned with her former colleague Helge Braun, who defended the Federal Intelligence Service for underestimating the Taliban's quick takeover. The inquiry is focused on the decision-making process and coordination between German government departments and international partners. Committee Chair Ralf Stegner highlighted the need to question Angela Merkel about United States negotiations under Presidents Donald Trump and Joe Biden, especially concerning the conditions tied to troop withdrawals.
Questions will have to be asked about the duty of care towards the local German forces, about the preparations for the evacuation operation, and also about the findings of the Federal Intelligence Service as to whether everything was as it should have been.
Meantime, former United States President Donald Trump continues to criticize the U.S. withdrawal, calling it a calamity. He seeks accountability. The international mission in Afghanistan has carried on for about 2 decades with the U.S. leading the way. Germany was also involved from the start, offering military and humanitarian services. The final report from the German inquiry is expected by the next February.
An international conference about French and Dutch colonialism in Saint-Martin opens in Baku. The event brings together representatives from Saint-Martin who are advocating against colonialism and for freedom. Participants include leaders of anti-colonial organizations, members of parliament, human rights defenders, NGO leaders, as well as decolonization experts, plus researchers. The participants discussed the impact of colonialism on the lives of local people and restrictions on political freedoms. Researchers emphasize that the colonial legacy on the island continues to exert a negative influence in both economic and political spheres.
France and Holland has sort of tell the international world that they have no more colonies. All the islands are free. And what we do is that we romanticize the aspect of autonomy between France and Holland. So the international world doesn't know about St. Martin. The people of St. Martin have been fighting for over 40, 60 years. My mother started this fight. My mother started this fight 40 years ago. And the only recourse we have is to go to France and go to Holland and speak in France and Holland. But to go to the United Nations, there is no legal course.
Well, the mechanisms that are available for us as St. Martin, being a colony from Holland, is that it's very limited because there is no international support in the sense of we are not allowed to go directly out in the world and let the people know what is happening to us. Everything that is on a legal basis and official basis has to be done through Holland or with the approval of Holland. That's the reason why we are seeking support with alliance, with allegiance, with other country that has experienced, the decolonization process that can assist us in the different ways and different steps on how to achieve this.
Before the United Nations, both the Republic of France and the Kingdom of the Netherlands maintain that they do not have any more colonies. Now, the reality is different, and that is why we're here. That is what we're trying to let the world know, that what both France and the Kingdom of the Netherlands are saying is not true. Because we remain, and we have been, and continue to be colonies in every sense of the word.
We received our separate status in 2010. We were part of the constellation of the Netherlands Antilles, which initially was made up of 6 islands and then ultimately 5. Aruba opted out in 1986. So the 2 referendums in which we had after, in 1994 and then again in 2000, was the dismantling of the Netherlands Antilles. So for us, the legal channel to take will, of course, be to invoke another referendum so that the voices of this country would be heard, whether it is they want to remain a colonized country or to opt out and be an independent country.
Japan takes bold steps to address its population crisis. In a groundbreaking move to promote work-life balance and encourage higher birth rates, the country introduces a 4-day work week for all government employees.
In Tokyo, a major demographic shift is underway. The aging population now outnumbers the young, creating a ripple effect of challenges for the workforce, economy, and social stability. With fewer young people entering the workforce and rising costs of social welfare, Japan's capital faces an urgent need for reform. To tackle these issues, the Tokyo metropolitan government will implement a 4-day work week for all government employees starting April 2025. The initiative aims to promote work-life balance, ease economic pressures on working families, and support working mothers. This move comes as Japan faces economic strain from a shrinking labor force and increasing dependency on elderly care. Economists warn that without reforms, Japan's global competitiveness could suffer. Japan is also turning to older workers to fill labor gaps. Nearly 40% of businesses now allow employees to work beyond the age of 70, especially in sectors like construction and retail. However, experts stress that relying solely on older workers isn't a sustainable solution. Japan's fertility rate has dropped to a record low of 1.2, well below the 2.1 needed for population stability. In response, the government is also promoting paternity leave and offering flexible work arrangements for families. Tokyo isn't alone in adopting such policies. Singapore recently introduced flexible work guidelines as part of a broader shift toward balancing work and family life.
Italian nun Anna Dinelli is arrested in Milan for allegedly helping the 'Ndrangheta, one of Italy's most notorious mafia organizations. The arrest is part of a larger investigation into the criminal group's activities across the country. She's accused of using her role as a volunteer at San Vittore prison to facilitate communication between imprisoned mafia members and the external operations of the syndicate. The investigation led to the arrest of 25 other individuals, including mafia affiliates and local politicians, plus the seizure of assets worth over 1.8 million euros. The mafia group is involved in drug trafficking, money laundering, and arms dealing. With more and more tourists flocking to China for its very beautiful snowy landscapes, the country is now expanding its winter tourism offerings to meet this growing demand.
As winter approaches, more tourists are rushing to China to experience the stunning snowy landscapes. To meet the growing demand, China has expanded its measures by offering ski resorts, scenic spots, hot springs and hotels, which are the main tourist boost for the winter economy. Data from travel platforms reveals that ski hotels in northern China have seen a 22% increase in bookings year-on-year, putting pressure on resorts to enhance their service.
Our homestay hotel has added a dozen of new snow view rooms of various types. Our supermarket and restaurant are also ready for service.
Northern provinces are leading the charge to boost winter tourism. Ski resorts like Beidao in Jilin expect record-breaking numbers, with tourism revenue projected to reach $75.8 million.
We expect that the Beidao ski resort will receive more than 1 million tourists, with the tourism revenue reaching 550 million yuan.
China's ambitious strategy to expand its ice and snow economy plans to generate around $208.7 billion by 2030.
And that will do it for us for now. Thank you so much for joining us. Please visit us online as well at anews.tv. We'll see you soon.